We're going to talk about dividing rational expressions, and we're going to start with a real quick review because we've already divided 2 times already, 2 different ways. So if you want to divide a polynomial by a monomial, the first thing you need to do is rewrite the division as a rational expression, which means in fraction form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this as 5x cubed minus 20x squared plus 30x divided by 5x. Now, just a reminder, when you're dividing this polynomial by a monomial, that means each term in the polynomial is divided by that monomial. So an easy way to do that is to just give each one its own denominator. Okay? And then we can just simplify or reduce these. So this becomes an x squared. This becomes minus 4x. And this becomes a positive 6. And there it is. Okay? Remember doing that? So pause the video and go ahead and do these two really quickly, please. You'll notice that I rewrote it and I gave each term in the polynomial a monomial divisor or denominator. And then I just simply reduced. On this particular one right here, 12 divided by negative 4 is 3, but then a p on the top and p squared on the bottom is going to leave you a p on the bottom. So it is okay to have a rational term in there. For the second one, I did the same thing. I gave each one of them a denominator of 6x, reduced each one, and that's what we got. Okay? Now, if we're going to divide a polynomial by a binomial, we need to factor both the numerator and the denominator and cancel out any common factors. So in this case, factored, this is going to be x plus 5 and x minus 3. And then the x minus 3 cancels with the x minus 3, and our answer here is x plus 5. Please remember, you may not cancel out any part of a binomial, a trinomial, or any other polynomial except a monomial. Okay? Now, to remember how you used to do long division, here's an example here in the corner. All right? 2 terms on the outside. Look at the first 2 terms here. 23 will go into 34. How many times? 1 time. We decided that 23 would go into 34 1 time. Multiply, then subtract. Bring down the next term. Say how many times will 23 go into 115? That'll go in there 5 times. Multiply, subtract, remainder of 0. Well, we're going to do the exact same thing, but with polynomials. Okay? So you'll see that you set it up. This is your divisor. This is the dividend underneath the division bar, and your quotient is the answer. So again, 2 terms on the outside. So I look at the first 2 terms right here. Then just look at the first terms. What times x will give you x squared? The object is you've got to get rid of that first term. And then you just kind of let the other ones carry on. So we put in x. So x times x is x squared. X times 2 is 2x. We are going to subtract both of these. This gives me a 0, and this gives me an x. Bring down the next term. Repeat the process. X will go into x how many times? 1. 1 times x is x. 1 times 2 is 2. Subtract, and you end up with a remainder of 0. Okay? And that's the same answer we would have gotten if we had factored and canceled out the common factors. All right? So I'd like for you to pause the video and try this one. All right? So 2 terms here. We're going to look at the first 2 terms here. What times x gives me x squared? X. So x times x is x squared. X times 3 is a positive 3x. We are going to subtract both of these. That's going to give me a 0, and this is going to give me a 7x. Bring down the next term, which is a plus 21. Repeat the process. What times x gives me 7x? That would be a positive 7. 7 times x is 7x. 7 times 3 is a positive 21. Again, we're going to subtract these. That gives me a 0. That gives me a 0. Okay, so see how easy that is? Go ahead and pause the video and try this one. All right, if you look at this one quickly, I decided to multiply by 2y. That gave me 2y squared minus 6y. When I subtract that, when I subtract the negative 6y, it becomes plus. Subtract that gives me y minus 3, and then it'll go in there positive 1 time. Okay? Sometimes the remainder is not 0. And what we're going to do is we can't put a decimal point and keep going. So what we're going to do is if we end up with a remainder, if we end up with something that is not 0, we're simply going to write it as a fraction. which will be whatever our remainder is, over our divisor. In this case, our divisor is x plus 5. Okay, ready? Two terms. What times x gives me 3x squared? That's going to be a 3x. So 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times 5 is a positive 15x. We want to subtract both of these. That's going to give me a 0, and this is going to give me a 4x. Bring down the next term, which is a plus 26. Repeat the process. What times x gives me 4x? That's going to be a positive 4. 4 times x is 4x. 4 times 5 is a positive 20. We are going to subtract those, and that's going to give me a 0 there and a remainder of 6. Take your remainder, which in this case is a positive 6, and put it over our divisor, which is x plus 5. Okay, so that's how it looks when you have a remainder. Go ahead and try this one. Okay, so we're going to start with a 3m up here. 3m times m is 3m squared. 3m times 3 is a positive 9m. We're going to subtract those. That's going to give me a negative 5m minus 2. What times m will give me negative 5m? That's going to be a negative 5. So negative 5 times m is negative 5m. Negative 5 times 3 is negative 15. Again, we're going to add these, so it's going to change both of those signs, and that's going to give me a positive 13. So my remainder is going to be a positive 13 over my divisor, m plus 3. Okay? Sometimes we might have to rewrite the polynomial so that it's in standard form, and we might have to use what we call a placeholder. Okay, so in this case, the first thing I'm going to do is write this in standard form. So that's going to be x cubed minus 4x minus 7, and I'm dividing by x minus 3. Now, I noticed right away as I started to write this, I have an x cubed, then I jumped over the x squares. There's no x squares there. I went right to the x and the minus 7. So what I'd like to do is take that and kind of pull it to the side. All right, and then I'm going to put a placeholder in here, and the placeholder is going to be no x squares. Now, I have to put the 0 there because I'm saying there are no x squares. All right, and you'll see why we need that when we start to do the division. Ready? What times x gives you x cubed? That's going to be x squared. X squared times x is x cubed. X squared times negative 3 is negative 3x squared. See, if I had had that underneath the x, I would not have been able to add those together. So now I'm going to subtract, and that's going to give me a positive 3x squared. Bring down the next term, which is a minus 4x. Repeat the process. What times x will give me 3x squared? I think that's going to be a positive 3x. So 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times negative 3 is negative 9x. We are going to subtract those, and that's going to give me a 0. This is going to give me a 5x. Bring down the next term here, which is a minus 7. Repeat the process. What times x gives me negative 7x? And that is going to be a positive 5. So 5 times x is 5x. 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. Subtract these, and I end up with 8. So my remainder is positive 8 over my divisor, x minus 3. Okay, go ahead and try this. Okay, this is our last example. So you'll notice that I went ahead and wrote this in standard form. I meant to do this, but I did not. I need to put my space holder in there because there were no x's. All right, and then that is a plus 1 on the end. And now let's divide. Ready? What times x gives you x cubed? That's going to be an x squared. X squared times x is x cubed. X squared times negative 2 is negative 2x squared. Let's subtract these, and that's going to give me a negative 2x squared. Bring down my placeholder of 0x. Repeat this process. What times x gives me negative 2x? That's going to be a negative 2x, gives me negative 2x squared. So that's going to give me negative 2x squared, and that's going to give me a positive 4x. Now be careful because this is where people make mistakes. You have to subtract these, which changes both of these signs. That's going to give me a negative 4x. Bring down the next one, which is a plus 1. What times x is going to give me negative 4x? I'm going to say that that is a negative 4. So negative 4 times x is negative 4x. Negative 4 times negative 2 is a positive 8. Just be really careful with your signs. Subtract both of those and you end up with a negative 7 remainder. So it's going to be negative 7 over your divisor, x minus 2, and there it is. And that's it.